of homeowners. The work group met 14 times over several months during the interim, with public listening sessions in each corner of the metro to hear from members of the community firsthand. As you can see, we are honored to have here with you today a wide range of authors and legislative stakeholders spanning both parties and both chambers. It's not every day that an issue brings us all together with such passion. So let's dive in. In the past few decades, we've seen an explosion of CICs and associations across the country. While they were once rare, today 82% of new homes in the marketplace are in an HOA. With the increase both nationally and here at home, our laws have simply not kept pace. The promise of CICs and HOA living has been one of affordable, well-maintained housing that offered the opportunity of homeownership to a wide array of people of every income level. And for some, that promise has delivered. And associations are well run by a board of volunteer homeowners sharing amenities and maintenance. However, the reality of many is one of escalating costs for monthly dues, special assessments for repairs, outrageous restrictions by boards run amok, escalating fines and fees, often for minor infractions, leading to foreclosure or residents forced to sell when their affordable housing is no longer affordable. Further, in Minnesota law often provides little guidance to boards and property managers, and no recourse for homeowners when the American dream turns into their worst nightmare. The bill before you encapsulates the expertise of work group members and the experience of homeowners to spell out in plain language a common sense set of reasonable standards to improve Minnesota law, provide necessary guardrails, and critical checks and balances to provide consumer protections for homeowners, placing people at the center of our work. The bill was created through the guiding principles of creating a standard of reasonableness, fairness, transparency, clarity, with an eye towards fostering opportunity for affordability for residents. The bill covers provisions around governance, including open meetings and governing documents, to dissolution and dispute resolution. It more clearly spells out a framework for fines, fees, and foreclosure, while tackling conflict of interest and the roles of municipalities and basic civil rights and freedoms. The Master Policy Bill sets ambitious bipartisan goals and is part of a suite of bills to take a comprehensive approach to reforming statute, including registration requirements, which will be covered by Senator Pott and Representative Hemmingson-Yager, AG enforcement, the creation of an Office of Ombudsman from Representative Moeller and Senator Marty, and finally a bill to create a task force on insurance, putting affordable housing out of reach for many of our families and our neighbors. Each of my fellow co-authors here today will share with you their why for what brought them to this work. But for me, it began with a steadfast constituent that saw things happening in her HOA that simply just weren't right. From an inability to ask for basic financial documents, being barred from asking basic questions at an open meeting, or fines for pointing out when the board wasn't following Minnesota law. Her family endured escalating tension and anxiety, robbing her of the power of feeling safe in her own home, or influence over the body regulating her family's largest asset, their home. Determined that there had to be a better way forward that honored the dignity of homeowners and a more transparent manner, she pushed back on her legislator to act. And I want to say thank you to Jen. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chair Lucero from the work group on CICs and HOAs.
Thank you, Senator Bonner. I am Eric Lucero. I am a real estate agent, and I'm also the Republican lead on the Senate Housing Committee. As such, residents from across the state have contacted me sharing stories and experiences with homeowners associations and common interest communities, such stories that include exploitation via excessive fines and fees, lack of transparency, conflicts of interest, and many more. Among the egregious stories that we heard, there were two from my own community. one constituent gave testimony in front of one of the listening sessions and shared her story, how she had a trash can that was away from the house down at the end of the road. And while she was traveling for several weeks and thus unable to bring the trash can back, there was a fine assessed, and it escalated to a whopping total of $56. And with that $56, the HOA board decided to initiate the foreclosure process. Another story from my community involves roof replacement. So we're all familiar with hailstorms, and we're all familiar with competitive bidding to help get the most efficient price for replacement. Well, their HOA board, working with the property management company, steered the work to a subsidiary of the property management company, lacking competitive bid and clearly creating a conflict of interest. And so it's these stories and many more that we included provisions in the HOA reform bill that would create that framework for excessive fines, fees, and foreclosure process, but also working to eliminate and put controls to avoid these conflicts of interest. And with that, I will introduce Senator Pa.
Thank you, Senator Lucero. This is Senator Susan Pa. I represent Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, and Osseo for Senate District 38. I too have heard the frustrations of homeowners in my district, as with my colleagues who have heard from their own constituents in their districts as well. That's complaints and stories of excessive fines, unexplained fees, and really a lack of transparency from HOAs. Just a few months ago, I actually heard from my constituent who reached out to me, who's also a council member, about receiving a fine for a violation she believed was wrongly issued and unjustified. She was given no warning about this violation, no chance to dispute it, and when she tried to talk to the HOA about it, she was refused to even have a discussion with them. Unfortunately, situations like this is very similar all across our state. And so today I'm really excited that we are tackling these issues. And with this bill, we will be requiring that HOAs and common interest communities adopt procedures for dispute resolution, ensuring that no homeowner is left without the process to contest fines or violations. Our bill also addresses the issues of fines for violations. It will require that associations adopt and provide to every unit owner a policy regarding the fines that includes the list of violations, that the fines may be imposed, and a schedule of fines for those violations, so that there's some transparency. The association must also provide the unit owner with reasonable time to correct the violation. So our bill tackles many of the issues that have been brought up to us by homeowners who live in HOAs and CICs. And so we're hoping that this bill will make a difference and bring fairness and bring transparency to HOAs and CICs. Next, I have Representative Shane Mecklin that will be speaking.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Representative Shane Mecklin. I represent the Becker-Big Lake area. I'm also in the trades. I'm a licensed general building contractor, so this particular work group was kind of really important to me, as we have heard many, many stories over the years of the local control is always better till local control runs amok. As everybody's pointed out, a specific story, so I have 5 communities in my district right now that all have community septic systems. They're all owned by the same company out of New Jersey. They've all been deemed non-compliant by the MPCA. Each and every one of these homeowners, anywhere from $23,000 to $28,000, have been assessed, and they've been given 3 years to pay it at $900 a month. Failure to make one payment will result in the commencing of foreclosure proceedings. One of the couples, actually, they can't afford $900 a month to try to sell their house, but nobody will buy it because it's got this black cloud hanging over it. These are very repetitive things. We've also heard when people simply will send an email, make a phone call, send a letter, asking questions for clarification, and sometimes it takes more than one attempt. What they get in return is a bill from an attorney for $2,000 that they're then assessed with, making the matter only worse. This is a very frequent occurrence. I believe we addressed that part of this as well in this bill. There are many things that need to be done going forward. Some of them are far more complex, but this is one heck of a good start, and I couldn't be more proud to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, and I will apologize, I did not introduce myself. I am State Representative Kristen Bonner of Maple Grove, serving my 4th term, and I represent the chair of the work group on common interest communities and HOAs. I also want to point out behind me, I do have Senator Limmer, my own senator, Senator Rasmussen, who owns a portion of this bill as well, Representative Hemmingson Yeager, my vice chair, Senator Lucero, excuse me, Senator Susan Pa, Representative Mecklin, who is also my co-author on the bill, and Chair Howard, who serves on the Housing Commission, or committee, sorry. And we are delighted to have him here. Senator Igo, or Representative Igo, I'm sorry, was not able to join us at the moment, but he is also an co-author on the bill. So I just want to make sure I make a shout out to the folks who are in the room here today. And with that, we do want to open up to questions from the audience if you have any for our folks.
I'm interested to hear if you guys have heard anything from stakeholders in the HOA, CIC side of things, how they're feeling about sort of this package of new language.
You know, I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. It depends on which stakeholders we're talking about. I think the reality is, you know, let's keep in mind that, you know, we've heard already in one of the Senate hearings, 86% of folks love their HOA, right? They're very satisfied, and that is fantastic. But let's be very frank. We are not here today because of the 86% who love their HOAs, for whom everything is going swimmingly. We are here for the 14% who are seeing some really disturbing trends and really have no recourse in this as well. For example, when we see homeowners that try to resolve issues on their own, they end up with massive attorney bills. They end up frustrated, angry, and disillusioned. They go to get help from folks like legal aid or even to the AG and are often told, really, we can't help you. There is no part of statute that really supports our ability to back you up. And it doesn't feel good for consumers when no one has your back. That's why we're here. Do I think that some of our stakeholders might not love every part of the bill? It's a pretty comprehensive package, and I suspect there will be some folks who won't love every part. But I want to stress the fact that you noticed here in this group, we have a bipartisan group of authors representing real estate, representing building, representing all different facets here. And I think what's interesting is when you get a coalition of folks from both sides of the aisle, from both chambers, from all different backgrounds, who are so passionate about this issue, it says something, right? And it says something that the bill that we've brought before you today has such incredible passion and such belief in it, behind it. So I would say that, you know, we will certainly be interested to hear what stakeholders have to say during testimony. We will certainly be open to having conversations with all stakeholders to make sure their voices are heard and that we hear any unintended consequences or concerns about the bill and that we can work with them. Please.
And just to add, the bill is a result of the work group recommendations. And the work group recommendations are the product of a broad cross-section of these stakeholders, including the management companies and many others. And so their voices, they definitely had a seat at the table to air their voices, to be part of this conversation. But the conversation isn't over yet. As was just referenced, the committee process will continue and those conversations to help make this the best bill possible for all of Minnesota.
Senator Abler called this a three-alarm fire yesterday, but I don't see in any of the 41 recommendations anything that would stop giving it oxygen, essentially. 82% of the new home builds go into a CIC or HOA. Is there any thought to doing something to kind of reduce that number? transferring to an HOA?
Yes, so Article 3, I would draw your attention to Article 3 of the bill, and I don't have it memorized, but it is something to the effect of that cities cannot condition, or municipalities cannot condition approval of new developments on an amenity or a feature that would necessitate the formation of an HOA. That is how many HOAs, or the reason behind many HOAs being formed. But I also want to make it clear, nothing in the bill would prevent a developer who seeks to form an HOA voluntarily. It just cannot be as a condition of approval for a new development. And that's, Article 3 is seeking to address that very concern that Senator Abler brought up.
I also want to say, Senator Rasmussen, I don't know if you want to say anything. I know you worked with a great deal of coalition partners on that specific provision. Did you want to say anything?
Sure,
with
yeah,
that
I'll just be
regard?
brief.
Yeah.
And I think what we oftentimes will see is that cities will condition permits on an HOA being granted, and they'll oftentimes use that as a way to regulate, beyond what they would typically regulate. And one of the concerns that I have from talking with constituents is it's also a way to shift costs onto these new homeowners, whereas in other parts of the city, these services would typically be provided by property taxes. And so one example is cities requiring an HOA to establish a park and have that be assessed by the members of that HOA, when in other parts of the city, you have that city park is being paid for by taxpayers and run by the city. So I think this will help make sure that if people want to have an HOA, they can, but you won't have local units of government forcing people into a product that they don't want.
Thank you.
One issue I've heard from homeowners who've had difficulties with their HOAs is that even when, Representative Bonner, you mentioned this, even when it's pretty clear that their HOA is violating Minnesota law, they have a hard time getting help from the Attorney General, or they have to pay a private attorney. Is there anything in here that would help beef up enforcement of laws that are on the books, or anything that might be passed as well?
So I want to say there's a couple of paths here when we talk about dispute resolution. First, the policy bill itself does address some issues around internal dispute resolution and having sort of a process to enable that, so that hopefully it doesn't get to that point. We'd like to stave more of that off at the pass. But that said, we do also have another bill that's traveling separately around AG enforcement issues, and that specifically is because, of course, it will have a cost, and we know we have to think about budgets. But if we take that one step further, there's a plan to create an office of the ombudsman. Senator Marty and Representative Moeller are carrying that bill. And that goes even a step further to sort of help set up sort of the best practices around HOAs, how we process dispute resolution, and sort of gives another level of protection for consumers and for associations.
Could you guys address just briefly the committee path forward for this and what that looks like, if you guys know at this moment?
As far as I'm aware, it's not set in stone yet, but as far as I'm aware, at least in the Senate, it's Senate File 1750, hoping to have a hearing in the Housing Committee next week. And then the path from there would also include state and local gov and judiciary.
And I will say on the House side, we are in negotiations with our friends in the Housing Committee, of which Chair Howard is in charge of that as the lead, and Representative Igo is the current chair of that committee. Again, I want to preface that both of those, both the chair and the lead are authors of the bill. There is a lot of momentum and support for this bill and a wide array of stakeholders. So I am excited to work with Chair Howard. Chair Howard, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Sure.
I will
Sure.
give you the opportunity.
I'll be really brief and just say that there's a lot of work happening on a bipartisan basis at the legislature this year to make sure that we're meeting the moment so that Minnesotans can afford the homes that they live in, and that we can increase the supply of homes that are affordable. And the amazing work that this HOA task force has done is a critical part of that conversation. I really think this and our overall housing work can be some of the most important bipartisan work that gets done this session.
Thank you. Yes.
So I know HOA board members are volunteers. A lot of times they don't have much experience when it comes to managing communities. This, if it were to pass, it seems like there would be a bit of a learning curve for folks who are on HOAs to get up to date with these new rules. Is there anything in here that you think makes their lives easier, or is it going to be kind of a new burden for them trying to catch up with these,
I
these
think.
new laws? And
Yes, and I think that's a good point. And I think, when we talk about things like having to set a schedule for fines and fees and be able to communicate that to your members. So on the front end of that, obviously that's going to take a little bit of work to do that. But here's the important part. When we talk about things like clearly communicating with our homeowners, we talk about transparency. I do think having the ability to have some of that is also a real benefit to those boards, right? Because now you have a clear set of expectations and roles and responsibilities, right? It's your responsibility to create those schedules. It's your responsibility to communicate that with your homeowners. So there's a good setting of expectations across the spectrum. And I think that actually may do a significant amount to help perhaps take the temperature down a little bit on some of those conflicts we see, or for homeowners to really understand what their responsibility is, right? It's not fun for a board to have to keep reprimanding a homeowner who's not following the rules, right? That's not fun. It's not fun for other homeowners in the area either. So I think there's that sort of level setting and expectation setting that comes with some of these that I think will be really important. And the current law as it stands really doesn't do any of that. It doesn't provide for that transparency. It doesn't provide for that clear communication. And one of the things we really strive for within this bill is to make sure that some of that starts to happen. Now, do I think it's the end of the road? Probably not. Do I think it could potentially be refined, or that there might be additional changes that will come as we vet the legislation? Absolutely. But I certainly hope that this will provide a much better set of expectations.
And to that point, I would just add, bringing in a framework, bringing in those expectations, removing some of that ambiguity helps to make the job easier. That structure does make the decision making easier for these volunteers. And that's the very point you brought up is something that actually was discussed, because we recognize that these are volunteers. And we have to balance that among the other considerations.
Yeah. And it's important to, that what we're trying to do here is set a plan for them to succeed and not a plan to fail. Because without having any of that clarity in the current statute or what those expectations are, let's be upfront, it's a little bit of a plan to fail.
last one from me.
Yeah.
A lot of the rising costs that have to do with HOAs are really a property insurance issue. I know insurance isn't really something that the work group worked on, but is there any plans to study that or introduce legislation on the insurance side of this?
Yep. Sorry, as I mentioned in the suite of bills that we're introducing, the last one on that list is in fact a bill that would create a task force to study the insurance issue. I've already been approached by a number of folks from both sides of the aisle who are actually very interested in this topic. In the scope of the work that we had for our work group, over 14 sessions and 3 listening sessions, we did not have as much time to do a deep dive on the insurance question. And because, let's be very frank, the insurance question is one that's very, very complex. And we need a lot of really good stakeholders in the room to have that conversation. And so I think trying to create a task force to work on that specific issue is one that we understand is really important, and it has a direct impact on affordability. Typically, we think about homeowners associations, condos, common interest communities as affordable housing, particularly naturally occurring and existing housing. But without having some sort of framework, without having some way to bring down costs for those, whether it be in their reserves, their assessments, or even when we talk about things like insurance, what we're seeing is that we're actually pricing folks out of what would normally be considered affordable housing. Any further questions?
What are you hearing from local governments? Are they interested in having a universal set of laws, or would they rather have a local control?
We have not heard a great deal from them. I will say most of the bill has to do with statute governing the boards, the property managers, et cetera, and sort of setting those expectations. It does not have a huge component that deals directly with municipalities, although we did mention Article 3 specifically, which does have an impact for them. And, you know, I think we will soon find out what their thoughts are on that particular provision. And again, we're always open to working with all of our stakeholders, but we certainly understand that there are larger questions that do impact HOAs specifically that come into play, especially when it comes to things like affordability. All right. Any further questions?
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. No problem.
You guys have session now?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We're moving.